welcome to Storytime with Chris. Today is the first episode of the Sports Saturday series that I'm starting on this channel. This will be a weekly podcast that drops every Saturday. I haven't decided what time it will drop each week, so stay tuned for that. I'll be talking about all things sports that interest me. This includes local sports, NFL news, and 49ers news especially. Because this is a weekly series, there may be lots to talk about, or nothing to talk about at all, so episodes may range from 5 minutes to several hours. It all depends on what is going on in my sports world. With that being said, welcome to any new listeners. If you're here for sports talk, this is the right place. I have other topics I cover on this podcast, including storytelling, album reviews, TV series and movie reviews, coffee, and cooking. If any of those things interest you, I encourage you to check out the rest of my podcast collection and subscribe, follow, or like my page. Each week I will have an agenda that I will announce at the beginning of the podcast so you know what we're talking about, and we have a pretty jam-packed agenda today. As always, we're going to be starting off with local news, sports news first, and it's been a while since I've done a podcast, so I think the last episode I did was on the Utah's NHL team, so we're going to get an update on that. We're down to our final 6 team names. I'll be talking about the Salt Lake Bees new stadium, the new Jazz uniforms and rebrand, thank God. In NFL news, we'll be talking about the Justin Jefferson deal, and for 49er stuff, we'll be talking about Christian McCaffrey's record-breaking deal. I think Brandon Aiyuk is gone, and Hunger Games against Deebo. That is all coming up next. New renderings from the new Bees home have been released, and when I first saw these renderings, I thought, man, this is pretty awesome. Like, I haven't been to a lot of Bees games as much as I would like to. I actually just talked to Jen today about potentially going to they do like a dog day, so you could bring your dog to the stadium, and it's really cool because you get a little Salt Lake Bees bandana for your dog. So I really want to do that. Probably in September is when I would try to go because it's way too hot in July and August, especially for our dog. So yeah, as much as I like that stadium now, these renderings that they released are pretty awesome. I'll be putting a few of these up. Hopefully I don't get flagged for it. But it's pretty similar-ish to what the stadium looks like now. I mean, you've got, the stands that are, normal stands, and then you have it's almost like a little park terrace area that looks like a nice place to hang out, maybe have some food. And then there's a lawn, which is much needed, of course. You need a lawn. If that's one of my favorite things about the Bee Stadium was when my dad would take us as kids, just go into the lawn and hoping you get a home run ball, of course. So it looks really nice. I mean, it looks like it is an upgraded version of what the stadium is now. I'm trying to figure out some of the other things that are in this rendering. There are some buildings kind of around the stadium, which is interesting if someone completely bombs a ball out of the ballpark. Jones on third. But yeah, anyway, it's really cool. It doesn't look like they have a lawn area on both sides like they do currently. It's only on one part of the arena of the stadium, and I'm questioning that now because I think most home runs get hit to the left if you're the batter. Most batters are righties, I believe. So most of the time you're going to get hits to the left field, which is where the lawn should be, but it's on the opposite side. I don't know which one gets more hits, honestly, but it's still really cool. It's almost like it, now that I'm looking at this rendering, it almost looks like the lawn is just public access, because I know they want to have they're calling it like ballpark place. It's kind of a little park area. It's going to have restaurants outside of the stadium, but looking at these photos, it kind of looks like it leads straight to that little lawn area inside the stadium. So that's really interesting. That means that really anyone could have access unless you have to pay to get into that part, which I don't know. It looks really cool to me. Honestly, I'm really excited. My little brother actually just moved out to the Daybreak area, and man, if I lived where he lived, I would seriously consider getting season tickets because that would be a fun thing to do. You could do all throughout the summer and fall. Anyway, if you're listening to the audio version only of this podcast, I apologize. This one is going to have quite a few visuals because I have a lot of visuals that I'm going to be showing. So I recommend you check it out on YouTube because that's where those visuals are going to be. So you have a better idea of what I'm actually talking about and looking at. There's some stuff that some of the renderings that they showed that really remind me of Vivint currently. Just like upgraded interiors. They had suites that looked really nice. There's like a dining area that looks really cool, really modern. And that is it's really cool. I mean, the thing about baseball is if you have season tickets, you might not always go just to watch games. You might go just to hang out or just to, a lot of business is done at baseball games. So it's really cool to see an upgraded version of what the Bees are doing currently. So anyway, let's go back to my agenda. Oh yes. So Daybreak is really interesting because they're kind of turning it into a mini downtown area. What's the word I'm looking for? Metropolitan? I don't know. They're like making it a mini downtown Salt Lake City, which is really cool. And there are renderings on the Daybreak website, or I think it's the Daybreak website, where they show a map. They have a video with what they really plan Daybreak to look like. And it's really, really cool. They, of course, have America First Square, which is where the Salt Lake Bees ballpark will be. I think they're putting in a movie theater, an amphitheater. Oh, okay. Now that I'm looking at this map, it's making a little bit more sense. So the amphitheater is right across from the baseball diamond. So that wasn't a general public space like I thought it was. That is an amphitheater space. So that'll be interesting. I wonder if they will have concerts at the same time as baseball games. Because, honestly, Utah needs a few more music venues. It seems like a lot of my favorite bands now haven't been coming as often. And I think part of it is because there are a lack of music venues to play at, or they're getting overbooked or something. So anyway, back to Daybreak. There are a lot of cool things that they want to do down there. There's of course, the Bees Stadium, the amphitheater, movies, restaurants, an ice rink, and even more. So I'm super excited to see what that area turns into. I know I said my little brother moved down there, and I'm really happy for him. I personally have never wanted to live in Daybreak. At least I wouldn't buy a house in Daybreak. I'll say that. He's renting an apartment, and I would have done that if I were in his situation as well. But it's just going to be really cool to see what Daybreak turns into. You're going to be able to walk everywhere down there. It's going to be a nice little community, I think. So nice. And it's almost as, downtown and Daybreak, I think, take about the same amount of time to drive to from my house. Daybreak might be a little bit longer. Maybe not. But I have one main request that they include in Daybreak with this whole, what do they call it? They're basically just planning this whole new entertainment community for this area. And there's one restaurant that they need to open a third location for, and that is Lucky 13. Lucky 13 is absolutely my favorite restaurant in Utah. It's somewhere I go to. I try to go every year for my birthday. It was a little bit different this year because my wife was not eating soy or dairy, so kind of limits our eating out options. But if they open a third Lucky's, that would be awesome. I really hope that the Lucky 13, the original right now, that's by this current Bee Stadium, isn't impacted too much by the Salt Lake Bees move. I know it will be affected for sure, but this is a golden opportunity to open a third location. There's the one in Jordan Landing, which is the one we actually go to the most because it's a little bit closer and we can usually get in a little bit faster. And having that third location, as an adult now, if I ever go to a Bees game, Lucky 13 is always going to be a part of that for me. And it would be a shame if that tradition stopped. But it would be awesome if they did something similar to the Jordan Landing location where they have a family side and adult side. So yeah, I'm super stoked to see what happens down there. Please bring Lucky 13 to the Daybreak area. I'm begging you. All right, up next, one thing that I am so excited for, it has been way too long since, it took them way too long to do this. The Jazz have finally rebranded and changed their color scheme again. This is really exciting for me. The Jazz are going back to purple, and it looks like they're including what is it, baby blue? Is that what we're going to call it, baby blue, as the secondary color? Thank God. And they're phasing out the yellow. So a few days ago, the Jazz released their new uniforms, and man, it got me super excited. I'm going to be talking about my favorites, but it's I have my issues with Ryan Smith and the way he's handled a lot of things. Especially the Jazz rebrand a few years ago where they went to yellow and black and white. And one thing that's bugged me about the Jazz, and this isn't just a Ryan Smith thing, but this has gone on for ever since they originally had the purple uniforms. They have had so many different colors. I mean, they had the green uniforms, they had the baby blue, and then they had the navy blue, and then they had navy blue again, and yellow and black. And this franchise, it's just, I don't think you can really, I don't think you're going to ever be seen as successful if you constantly are changing I understand changing your uniforms and freshening things up, but your color scheme constantly, that's, I don't know, it just makes you seem not professional. It's kind of like you're, I don't know, semi-pro or Little League or something. These new uniforms are so awesome. They have two purple ones. I don't think they're entirely new. They're just kind of refreshed. And then my two favorites, which are the white and with purple mountains, and then the black. The black one is sick. Like I said before, you're going to want to check out the visual version of this podcast on YouTube, because I'll have a picture of what I'm talking about up on the screen. And as you can see right now, we've got the 4 Jazz players, Laurie, Keontae, Kessler, and I haven't been following the Jazz as closely, so I don't know who the other guy is. But going from left to right, Laurie's is sweet. I mean, that is just, the classic Jazz look, kind of like a throwback. And I actually have an idea for this specific uniform that I'll get to later. Keontae's is really cool. The white, the color scheme, man, the purple and baby blue is just chef's kiss. It is one of my favorite color schemes in sports, and I'm so glad that they're going back to it. This white uniform is super clean, and I think the key thing with all these uniforms is that they went clean. They went with a clean and simple look. With the Jazz's current uniforms, the yellow, they went with a simple look. And I think it's key to have clean and simple. You can't always have both, kind of like Apple's logo. You look at Apple, it's clean and it's simple. What's a bad logo? I'm trying to think. Like the Jazz current uniforms, the black ones, when you look at that, it just says, what is it, Utah Jazz and yellow font, and it's just boring. This provides a nice, clean, simple look, but also with a little bit of a throwback flair. So I love it. The black uniform is probably my favorite. It's so good. You've got the mountains in the background that are, you just got that black shading on it with gray sides. Got the Jazz note and the number, which I think is just a nice look. It's always been one of my favorite looks with the Jazz uniforms in general, is the number, right directly below the note. Then you still have purple on the uniform. It's just a little bit of a trim, accent color, but still it looks really nice. And then you have Kessler's uniform, which is very similar to the white one, just basically reverse, clean look. And they also released a bunch of merch that goes along with these uniforms. So yeah, it's actually stuff that I would consider spending my money on, because the other stuff that they've had in recent years are just not good at all. So I'm glad they listened to the fans and they changed it. Along with the new uniforms, they kind of released an updated logo. So they have the Jazz note and then this little mountain logo, which I believe is pretty new. I don't know if the Jazz have had that look before. I don't know how I feel about this, but one thing that the Jazz social media really emphasized were the Utah mountains, and none of the uniforms say Utah Jazz. 3 of them say Utah, 1 of them has a Jazz note. So I'm kind of wondering if along with the rebrand, they're thinking about changing the name as well. I don't know how I feel about that. Honestly, I think they should just keep the name, and if they wanted to change the name, they should have done it with the original rebrand. Now at this point, it's kind of like, yes, you're finally going back. You're listening to Jazz fans. You're going back to purple. You're including the mountains. Oh, but you're changing the name. It's even worse. I think Jazz fans would rather keep the name Utah Jazz with horrible uniforms than change the name with the updated look. But maybe that's just me. Another thing that the Jazz released is this. Well, I don't think the Jazz actually released this, but I saw it on Twitter. It's Utah Jazz basketball in a circle around the note. That's all purple. It has a baby blue background, and that color scheme is just so good, and it makes me want to buy, I would actually buy Jazz gear if it looks just like this. So more things to be excited about for sure. So they're not going to be wearing the uniforms all at once, which makes sense. I'm sure the NBA has some sort of rule about that. So for the 24-25 season, they're going to be rocking their white current uniforms, which are not horrible, but still, they're black and yellow, way too simple uniforms. Then they're going with the black note and mountain background, which is their statement edition, and I am so excited to see that uniform in action. And then their city edition is basically the throwback with mountain Utah across the chest. So that brings us to 2025. That one I just talked about. The city edition is not listed. They have the 2 new they have the association edition and the icon edition, which I love. They have the statement edition, which I also love, and then they have another city edition that hasn't been on the thing I found. It's blank. So one thing I think would be really cool, they have purple on every uniform, uniform. And every team in the NBA has one uniform that's kind of different. It's their city edition. The Jazz used to have their orange and red, yellow gradient, which is really cool. But one thing I think would be awesome is if we saw this uniform, which I'm putting up on the screen right now, and you have to visualize it with me. I wanted to go in and change the colors so you could actually see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to try my best to explain my vision here. Take the purple of the uniform and switch that to baby blue. Take the baby blue from the uniform, switch that purple, and then you have a good mix of, the Darren Williams era of basketball and the Utah Jazz of the 90s. I might try to, no promises, but I might try to play around with that so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But I think that would be an awesome look for their city edition, because the city edition is usually different than anything else. So it's okay to have one uniform that stands out, as long as it's not yellow. God, thank God they're getting rid of the yellow. So with that being said, really excited, really encouraged by what the Jazz have done with their rebrand. And it looks, visually, it's all stuff that I would buy. I'm still not thrilled about their rebuilding process. I'm very skeptical about completely gutting your team and rebuilding it. Don't know if that will always work, but I guess we'll see. I don't really have any Jazz. I don't have any Jazz gear right now. I used to when I was a kid, but I've outgrown all that stuff. I have a couple of Jazz hats. My little brother gave me some Jazz hats, and they've since switched color schemes twice. So thanks, Jazz. They're still really cool hats, though. I wear those hats all the time. They're some of my favorites. So we'll see if I buy merch. We'll see if I decide to buy Jazz merch or NHL merch first. That is still up in the air. But that brings us to our next topic. Ryan Smith has been really busy this for the last few months, and part of that busyness, of course, is getting the NHL to Utah and determining what the team name will be. And we are down to our final 6 NHL team names for Utah. And I thought I had these somewhere, but apparently not. I'm going to be talking about 6 and what my thoughts are for all of them. All right, the 6 finalists for the Utah NHL team name are Utah Blizzard, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Outlaws, Utah Venom, and Utah Yeti. So out of all these options, I think only 4 of them are remotely good. The one I voted for was Utah Outlaws. If you check out my NHL team name episode, you'll know why that's one of my favorites. After that, I would say Blizzard is probably next on my list. It is pretty similar to the Avalanche team name, but hey, Colorado, they're right next door, and that could be a potential great rivalry. Utah Mammoth it could have been so good. All they had to do was add an S to the end, because Utah Mammoth just sounds stupid. Like, I don't understand, like, why? Why is it not plural? Utah Mammoths. And all the visuals, all of the mascots, logos, all the stuff you could have done with Mammoths. So good. Instead, they're going with Utah Mammoth. It just boggles my mind. I don't know why that bothers me so much, but I hate it. So... Utah Outlaws. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. Utah Hockey Club. This just sounds amateur. What's going to happen when the Pittsburgh Penguins come into town and they're playing the Utah Hockey Club? It sounds like it's Bush League. This one is probably the worst one on this list. Utah Venom is one of my favorites. It's in my top 3 favorites. It goes Outlaws, Blizzard, then Venom. I think Venom is just a cool name. It's a cool hockey name, and you have a lot of different directions where you can go with that. Obviously you have snakes in Utah. We have rattlesnakes. We also have the Gila monster, which I've talked about before. So yeah, Venom is a good one. And Utah Yeti, while it's not my favorite, I'd rather have that before Hockey Club or Mammoth. Like, it's grown on me to the point where I would accept Utah Yeti. I wouldn't love it, but I would accept it. And the only thing with Yeti that kind of really bothers me is that there's Yeti coolers. So I just, it's good, but I'm going to think of coolers every time I think of Yeti before anything else. So hopefully Utahns are on my side and go with the Outlaws or Blizzard or Venom. That's my dog making disgusting sounds. You are gross. Anyway, sorry about that. If this NHL team is named Hockey Club or Mammoth, maybe even Yeti, I don't think I'm going to buy any He's being loud. Flynn, can you go sit? Yeah, if I'm not going to buy any merch if it's named after any of those things because it would be embarrassing and I would not want to be seen wearing stuff like that. So those are my thoughts on the Utah NHL team. So yeah, let's move on to NFL news. Right. So Justin Jefferson just signed a new deal. 4 years, $140 million, 110 guaranteed. This averages out to about $35 million per year. It's just insane, man. I don't have any problems with the Vikings paying the best NFL and the best receiver in the NFL. What I have an issue with is them paying the best receiver in the NFL and not having a quarterback that can get him the ball. I mean, I understand paying him. He's going to be a key piece. He is coming off an injury-prone season, but hopefully they have a guy in JJ McCarthy. I think that's who they drafted, right? Yeah, JJ McCarthy. Otherwise, they're going to be rolling with Sam Darnold, which good luck with that. Any 49ers fans that followed me or listened to my podcast last year about Sam Darnold know that I'm not a fan. So good luck with him. And hopefully, I'm not a Vikings fan, but hopefully they're going to be able to pay, a quarterback and other key pieces. It just seems insane that they're paying this much for a wide receiver. For a wide receiver when they don't have their quarterback in place. Also kind of going on, let me take a sip of coffee. Also going on with the Justin Jefferson stuff, it was reported that the 49ers were actually a team that reached out about potentially acquiring Justin Jefferson. That's very interesting, considering that, Brandon Aiyuk is looking for a contract extension, which they don't have to give him this year because he can play on the 5th-year option. Of course, he wants to get paid and I don't blame him, but, I think Brandon Aiyuk is gone, honestly. I don't think the 49ers pass the ball enough to really... They can't afford to pay 3 wide receivers because they already paid Deebo and Juwan Jennings. And they basically told Aiyuk that they want those 2 guys. They drafted Ricky Pearsall and they're slapping Brandon Aiyuk in the face. I kind of wonder if they're going to be permanently ruining their relationship with him, honestly. Because imagine, Deebo got paid a few years ago, but this year they didn't have to pay Juwan Jennings. They paid him. They drafted 2 wide receivers. And if I'm Brandon Aiyuk, I'm like, okay, so you paid this guy this much money a few years ago. You just paid the 3rd guy who's below me, and then you drafted 2 other guys. I would feel like the writing's on the wall. And honestly, I think the Niners are going to force Aiyuk to play on his 5th-year option. I highly doubt he's going to get paid. So I think there are 2 scenarios. And the most likely scenario is that they trade him, honestly. They're kind of refusing to pay him. And quite frankly, I don't think they can, especially with Brock Purdy's deal coming up next year. And they just don't throw the ball enough to really justify that. And plus, they got other receivers that they can get ball to. I don't know. I think the writing's on the wall, unfortunately. And they called about Justin Jefferson. Would they, if the Vikings had agreed to a trade, would the 49ers be paying Justin Jefferson $35 million a year and Deebo Samuel, $26 million a year? That's an expensive receiver room. So I'm sure they would have had to get rid of Deebo as well if they made that deal. But it's really interesting. I honestly believe that he's got... Oh, and also Christian McCaffrey just signed an extension. His deal was, $38 million over 2 years. So what is that? $19 million per year. So they're telling Aiyuk, we have our key pieces. These are guys that we want to keep. You are more of a luxury. Sorry, Aiyuk, we're not going to pay you. You got to play on the 5th-year option or you're gone. You're going to get fined. We're not paying you. That's what it screams to me, which is why I believe that Aiyuk is gone. There was an interesting tweet by Mike Silver, which I'm going to pull up here. A very short version of where things stand with the 49ers and the receivers. They drafted Pearsall in the 1st round. He's a big part of the present and future. If Aiyuk ends up taking their best offer, Deebo will be gone after 2024. If Aiyuk doesn't take their best offer and plays on the 5th-year option, it's Hunger Games between him and Deebo to see who stays beyond 2024. And there's still a chance that either of those guys are traded between now and November if the offer is good enough or if things have devolved with Aiyuk. So I don't know. I'm also seeing things from like Matt Mayoko said, there's, you can't keep every player on your team. There's eventually someone's going to have to leave. And he's a guy who's really connected with the Niners, and I think he knows what he's talking about. So there's a good shot that Aiyuk is going to be gone, which sucks, but also it makes sense as well. But that brings me to the final thing that I wanted to talk about, which is what Silver said about Deebo if Aiyuk plays on the 5th-year option. If Aiyuk doesn't doesn't take their best offer and plays on the 5th-year option, it's Hunger Games between him and Deebo to see who stays beyond 2024. I think that's a really interesting way to say that. Like, it's Hunger Games between him and Deebo. That is implying a lot. Like, they're both going to have to give their best effort throughout this whole season. And honestly, I hope that happens. Because if we get a fired up Deebo versus a fired up Aiyuk, and they're both just trying to ball out, I mean, that could be a good thing for the Niners. It could also be a bad thing if, one of them feels like it's an unfair advantage for the other, or one of them is getting more targets than the other. And Deebo is my favorite player on the team. I love everything about Deebo. And this is where I really want to take this topic. It's actually not really related to football at all. Hunger Games against Deebo Samuel. How scary would that be? Like, the thing about Deebo is, I'm thinking about the Hunger Games movies, and if the NFL as a whole were playing in the Hunger Games, that would be a little bit different. But the thought of going against Deebo, I don't care if you're an NFL player or not, that is terrifying. Deebo not only is he fast and agile, he is very, very strong. Rarely does a first guy tackle Deebo when he gets the ball. So to think of him in a Hunger Games situation where he's fighting for his life, and he plays his best ball when he's angry, when he's fired up, when he has something to, when CJ Gardner-Johnson is running his mouth, or when the Eagles are running their mouths, he gets fired up, he gets angry, and he's a madman in those situations. So in a life or death situation, I don't want to cross Deebo Samuel. I would bet all my money on Deebo Samuel winning in a Hunger Games tournament just blindly without knowing who else is on the other side. And I don't believe they have guns in Hunger Games. It's usually hand-to-hand combat or handheld weapons, I believe. Could be wrong. So in that situation, yeah, I would place a lot of money on Deebo to win Hunger Games. And the thought of him and Aiyuk going at it this year, I mean, it could drive them apart. It could bring them together. But I think competition like that is, if you're made of the right stuff, it's a good thing. Like Jerry Rice versus Deion Sanders. Those two guys went after each other all the time in practice, and they made each other better. Those are two of the best players in NFL history. Well, one of them is the best player in NFL history, Jerry Rice, and Deion is one of the best cornerbacks in NFL history. So, iron sharpens iron. I hope Aiyuk is a part of the long-term plans for the Niners, and I hope that they make him play on the 5th-year option, and it is Hunger Games against him and Deebo, because then you can have some really crazy stuff, and it might be just enough to push him over the top and finally win a Super Bowl. But I'm not getting my hopes up this year. The Niners have let me down too many times. At this point, I'm just kind of wondering, how are the Niners going to break my heart this year? Because I've never seen the 49ers win a Super Bowl. Last time they won was in 94. I was born in 97. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, that's that. Don't mess with Deebo. Don't put Deebo in the Hunger Games, because he will mess people up, man. And this is unrelated, but I have a Deebo jersey that my dad and brother got me last year at the 49ers playoff game against the Packers, which is awesome. And then my wife gave me a Deebo shirt jersey for Christmas a few years ago. I believe it was Christmas, and they're both number 19. So it is really cool to have the original jersey, but it would not be cool if, I don't have an issue with it, actually. Anyway, thanks for listening into this first edition of Sports Saturday. This was a very jam-packed episode. I highly doubt every episode is going to look like this, just because there isn't always this much news. There was a lot of local news that came out with the Jazz, the Bees, and the NHL team. So I highly doubt every episode is going to be this long, but thank you for joining in. Please like and subscribe to the channel, whether you're on YouTube or Spotify. Every listen I get means a lot to me, and if you took time out of your day to listen to me and even watch the visual version of this podcast, I really appreciate you. So yeah, we'll see what topics are going to be available for next Saturday. I think I've decided that I'm going to be releasing these episodes actually at nighttime on Saturday. So I don't know, what should I say? 5 o'clock Mountain Time? 5 o'clock Mountain Time on Saturday. You can expect Storytime with Chris, Saturday Sports Edition. Still, the name is also a work in progress. But thanks again for listening. This has been Storytime with Chris.